Hello and welcome to everyone. My name is Julie Nussbaum, and I am president of the Jewish Federation of Greater Rochester. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. We are 150 strong and counting. We come together at an incredibly difficult and perilous time for our global Jewish family. During the course of the last week, Hamas and other terrorist groups in Gaza have fired thousands of rockets at Israel, killing and injuring many innocent civilians. Watching the suffering has been painful and heart-wrenching. This pain compounded by a rise in anti-Semitism and a sense that we are alone, and again painted as different or the other. With today's program, we aim to provide an opportunity to process and mourn with our Rochester family and to stand in solidarity with the people of Israel. We hope our speakers will reflect the many facets of our community's deep relationship with Israel and will not only offer comfort, but will give you some tools and words and information for the challenging days ahead. We will hear from Rochester Board of Rabbis Chair Rabbi Peter Stein of TBK, retired Georgetown professor and Middle East expert Ralph Nurenberger, Rena Edelstein, who is Associate VP of Global Programs for the Jewish Federations of North America, is leading the crisis response. Mayor Chaim Bibas and Ronit Beutner of Modi'in, our partnership city in Israel, and our amazing Shinshinim, Itamar and Oren. I want to especially recognize all of our communal leadership, in particular Federation CEO Meredith Dragon and our dedicated Federation staff for putting this program together so quickly and for exhibiting swift and strong and decisive action in this crisis. It is not always easy to be in the public eye during times like these, but even in the face of personal attacks, Meredith and the Federation team has shown grace and mettle. Thank you. Again, thank you all for being here. Together, we mourn the loss of innocent Israeli and Palestinian lives. Together, we hope for an end to the violence and bloodshed. And together, let us pray for Israel's security and for enduring peace in the region. And now I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Peter Stein. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you so much, Julie. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here as president of the Board of Rabbis and a senior rabbi at Temple B'rith Kodesh, and as someone who cares deeply about what's happening in Israel. I offer first the ancient words of prayer coming from the Psalms, Sha'alu Shalom Yerushalayim, Yishlayu Havayach. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you prosper. And I add modern words of prayer written by one of Israel's great heroes, Anat Hoffman, who has been to Rochester many times and has inspired many of us with her leadership. Eli, my God, in this sacred moment, give us hope for Israel and her future. Renew our wonder at the miracle of the Jewish state. In the name of the pioneers who made the deserts bloom, give us the tools to cultivate a diversity of Jewish expression in Israel. In the name of our fallen soldiers, give us courage to stand up to the words and ways of zealots, those in our own midst and those among our neighbors. In the name of Israeli inventors who have amazed the world with their innovations, help us apply the same ingenuity to finding a path to peace. In the name of all these individuals, grant us the strength to conquer doubt and despair in Israel, replacing doubt with action, replacing despair with hope. And let us say, Amen. And at this time, I turn the program to Meredith with great thanks for the opportunity to be with you all today.
Peter, thank you so much for your words of comfort and wisdom and hope, because I think we all could use some of all of that right now. the Board of Rabbis this week under your leadership issued a beautiful statement, and we took those words to heart. So thank you for your leadership and our rabbinic leadership in the community. It's greatly appreciated. Julie, thank you for your intro and your kind words as well. It's been a challenging week, and I feel similarly about our staff and our community that we've been working hard, and I'm glad to see so many people here this morning who are interested in participating and standing in solidarity with Israel as well. So it's my pleasure at this point to introduce our speaker, Ralph Nurenberger, who, as Julie mentioned, is a scholar and expert, and also happens to be a dear friend of mine. Whenever there is a need for some scholarship and some honest conversation, Ralph is usually my first call and my first stop. And I always find his ability to manage a variety of sides and perspectives when we're talking about complicated issues is really quite outstanding. So Ralph, I will turn this over to you to share your words of wisdom with our community, to take a look at how we got to this point, and more importantly, where do things look like they're going, and what can we, what do we think that the next few weeks will look like? So so thank you. And we aren't going to be having a question and answer period with Ralph. But if there are questions that you do have, you can certainly either email them to me and I'll share them with Ralph, or you can text them to me if you have my cell phone number. But we'll get the questions to Ralph. It's just we're trying to keep the time to an hour this morning, and we could be doing Q&A, I think, all day. So Ralph, thank you so much.
Well, Meredith, thank you. As a start, I'd like to thank you and the Rochester Federation for putting this event together. I got the call yesterday, this is obviously thrown together rather quickly. All of us, I think, are watching the news with dread every time we turn it on. It seems that the way to watch news now is you turn on at the beginning of every hour, since the events in Israel and Gaza and the West Bank and also northern Israel, southern Lebanon are always the first item. So the way to watch news now is to watch the first 10 minutes, and then you can go on and have 50 minutes of your hour before it comes on again. One of the problems with the current events is that we become overwhelmed with what is happening now, and we miss the overriding cause. It's sort of as if someone has cancer or heart disease and then falls down and breaks their arm. And obviously you have to deal with the broken arm immediately, but that doesn't make the overriding issue go away. And the overriding issue, and I'm going to make the same mistake. I will look at the trees, what's happening now, rather than the forest. And the overriding problem, the cause, is a failure on all sides to work out a peace agreement that is, or even a sustainable, equitable status quo. All sides are seeking at best to manage the conflict and not resolve it. Essentially, and again, just looking at the big picture before we look at what's actually happening now, the competing interests, it is almost as if the Palestinians and the Israelis are living in two totally different universes. From the Palestinian side, they continue to refuse to recognize Israel. They believe that it is in their interest for continuing hostilities, periodic violence carried out by people out of frustration, out of political views, or what have you. You have an education system that teaches young Palestinian children that Israel has no right to be there, that maps in their elementary school don't even have Israel on the map. And all of this is, of course, compounded by their anger and their despair at their current living conditions, which they blame on Israel. From the Israeli point of view, from the Palestinian point of view, they are angry at the perpetual blockade of Gaza. People who live in Gaza can't travel. They view it as a large prison. Their society and their economy is undermined, particularly in Gaza, to a lesser degree in the West Bank. All of this reflects failed leadership on the part of both the Palestinians and the Israelis, and none of these conflicts will be resolved until there are leaders on all sides who are willing to make necessary compromises to try and resolve the conflict in some way. That said, with that overview, would like to take a look at 4 questions. No, this is not Passover, but I will throw out 4 questions. Number 1, why now? Number 2, what makes what is happening now different from past violence and insurrections, hostilities? Number 3, what is the role that the US can play? And number 4, how do we move forward from this? If someone had a Rip Van Winkle experience in 2014, which was the last time there was something similar to this outbreak in violence. In 2014, the violence between Israel and Gaza lasted a total of 50 days. The Palestinians claimed that over 2,200 Palestinians were killed. Israelis give a figure of about 70 Israelis who were killed. In all likelihood, the Israeli number is too low. In all likelihood, the Palestinian number is too high. But ballpark, we can use those numbers. But if someone had gone into a coma or gone to sleep in 2014 and woke up last week, turned on the TV and said, oh, this is continuing, it looks the same. And yes, it does look the same, but there are major differences. So the first question is, why now? In essence, we are witnessing what could best be considered a perfect storm. A number of events took place all within the last few days and weeks, none of which on their own could have led to what we're now seeing. None of which individually would have led to what the violence that we're now seeing. But when you add them all together, all happening within a brief period of time, within the context of the overall conflict, you can see how this erupted into the horror that we're now looking at. And it's important to remember, we're looking at policy and we're sitting here safe in our own homes. So far, 180 plus Palestinians have been killed, according to their estimates. 10 Israelis have been killed, 2 of them children. Over 1,000 people have been injured. Over 4 million Israelis are now living within the range of rockets coming in from Gaza. I got an email this morning from my cousin who lives in Tel Aviv saying that they heard rockets flying over their head. And the fear of just going through the day, you have to make sure you think of this in terms of the individual hardships and tragedies as well. So why is this happening now? First of all, a condition that I haven't seen any of the commentators that I've watched on TV talk about is the pandemic, COVID-19. For the past year and a half or whatever, people have been locked up in their homes, social distancing, the fear of the disease coming upon them, and all of a sudden the anger of frustration that all of us feel of being locked in our homes has led to increased tensions on individuals. A second failure, which is far more pertinent to this conflict itself, is the failure by both the Israelis and the Palestinians to elect their own leaders at a time when leadership is so important. On the Israeli side, within the last 2 years, Israel has held 4 inconclusive elections to try and elect a prime minister. All you need to do to understand Israeli politics is know 2 numbers, 120 and 61. There's 120 seats in the Knesset, 61 is 1 more than half. No Israeli government in the history of the country has ever gotten to 61 seats on their own. It's always been a coalition. In the last election, after the last election, Bibi Netanyahu's Likud party had a plurality. They began to piece together a coalition, everything from the far-right Kahanist party to the religious parties, but they fell short. Bibi was able to get up to the 50s, but not to 61. As a result, literally last week or within the last 10 days, after he failed to meet a deadline, a second effort was going to be put together by a coalition led by Yair Lapid, the Yesh Atid party, which is a centrist party, together with two Likud offshoots, one headed by Naftali Bennett and the other by Gideon Sa'ar, to see if they could put together an anti-Bibi coalition. And the only thing that united these people of totally different ideologies and views on issues was they didn't want Bibi to remain as prime minister. And it looked like they were going to be able to put together an anti-Bibi, for lack of a better term, coalition last Thursday, literally just 3 or 4 days ago. But in order to do that, they needed the support of one of the Arab parties, a party headed by Mansour Abbas, known as either the United List or Ra'an. They have about 4 or 5 seats, and Lapid and Bennett and Sa'ar's group had 57. If they could have gotten this Arab party, there would be a government in place. How stable it would be, we could have argued, but it didn't happen because now the Arab party, the Arab United List, said that they won't join with a Jewish coalition. And so literally, even though Hamas started this conflagration, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, one of the consequences is that it ensured that Bibi Netanyahu will remain as prime minister. The joke in Israel is that cats have Bibi lives. I mean, it's almost a Monty Python skit of I'm not dead yet. And Netanyahu will remain as prime minister with his support going up because he's leading the defense of Israel. As bad as the Israeli electoral system sounds, it's even worse on the Palestinian side. The Palestinians last held a presidential election in 2005. They elected Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, to a 4-year term. I'm bad at arithmetic, but 2005 plus 4, somehow he's in the 16th year of a 4-year term. The Palestinian parliament was last elected in 2006. Abbas called for new elections. He called for them in January, and then 93% of Palestinians who were eligible to vote registered to vote. There was tremendous enthusiasm for this new election, but then Abbas looked at the polls and he realized that he wasn't likely to win, in large measure because there were quite a few different Fatah, which is his party, Fatah coalitions running, and they would split the secular Palestinian Authority PLO vote, and Hamas, which had a unified list of characters of candidates, would likely win the election. So rather than risk losing the election, he canceled it or postponed it. And he did this on April 29, so only 2 or 3 weeks ago. And that led to enormous frustration among the Palestinians, feeling that they had had bad leadership. They hoped for the opportunity to replace this bad, corrupt leadership that had not helped them economically or achieve peace. And suddenly the elections were pulled out from under them. So there was really enormous frustration. With that as the background, there were a series of individual date events, all coming together by chance this year within a week or 2-week period. I'll list just 4 of them to give you an idea of how each of these individually wouldn't have led to anything, but when you combine them, you add to additional frustration. First, an Islamic holiday called Laylat Al-Kadar, which commemorates when Muhammad received the Quran in the 7th century. The date of this event, May 8, Nakba Day. Among the Palestinians, they view the Israeli independence in 1948 as the Nakba, the catastrophe, in which many of them had to leave their homes. They wound up becoming refugees, and they view the establishment of the state of Israel as a catastrophe. Nakba Day, scheduled May 15, just a day ago. Jerusalem Day, the opposite. From the Israeli perspective, in 1967, unifying the city of Israel, of Jerusalem, and a cause of celebration, which is, of course, on the Palestinian side, a cause of anguish. And then Israeli Flag Day, in which Israelis marched through Jerusalem, ending up at the Kotel, the Western Wall, to celebrate the unification of Israel controlling Jerusalem. All of these events within a 2-year period, a 2-week period, again, led to anguish, led to increased tensions. So what led to the current events? Basically, it was what could best be described as a real estate deal. A suburb of East Jerusalem called Sheikh Jahar. It's in Eastern Jerusalem. Jews purchased this land in 1875. And Jews lived in this neighborhood. It's a relatively small neighborhood in eastern part of Jerusalem from 1875 until 1948. In 1948, Jordanians were able to gain control of the eastern part of Jerusalem. The Jews left eastern Jerusalem, many places, including Sheikh Jahar. The Jordanians used this land to put refugees in, and Palestinian Arabs have lived there since 1948. The Jews wanted to get their land back, and based on a law that was passed in 1970, they began to file petitions to regain the land, even though the Palestinians were paying rent on it. And there was going to be a Supreme Court decision on May 10. So literally a week ago from tomorrow, this Israeli Supreme Court was going to issue its verdict on could the Israelis regain this land, or could the Palestinians who were living there remain there? And it looked likely that the Jews' land was going to get back to them. That in turn led to protests within Jerusalem that spilled out onto the Temple Mount. Here, the Israeli police used, from the Palestinian perspective, excessive force. The Palestinians claim, no way to know if this is true, 300 Palestinians were injured, and the Palestinian Authority was unable to do anything. This is when Hamas took advantage of the protests in Jerusalem and the ineffectiveness of the Palestinian Authority to decide to shell Israel with rockets. And the beginning of the hostility came about when Hamas made a conscious decision to try and gain control of the loyalties of Palestinians in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, if you will, from the Palestinian Authority, particularly in light of the elections having been canceled. So whatever you may think about the current issues and the Palestinians' concern about Sheikh Jahar, really nothing justifies indiscriminate rocketing of civilians. As a number of commentators have pointed out, this was the beginning of the current hostilities. US Secretary of State Tony Blinken said there's a fundamental difference between a terrorist organization in Hamas that is indiscriminately targeting civilians and in Israel, which is defending itself. So that's how this got going. So that comes to the second question. What are the differences between the current hostilities that we're now viewing and the past? Israel has fought with with Hamas in Gaza on a number of occasions, most predominantly in 2008, 2012, and then the longest one and the most deadly, sadly, in 2014, most intense. As mentioned before, in 2014, the Palestinians claimed that 2,200 Palestinians were killed, over 70 Israelis were killed. It lasted for 50 days. If you turned on the TV then and now, it looks the same, but it's not. It's quite different. What are the differences? Number one, Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, is significantly weaker today than he and they were in 2014 in terms of the support that they are receiving from the Palestinian people in general. Number two, a major difference is the weapons that Hamas now has that they didn't have in 2014. The rockets, they've shot off somewhere around between 2,000 and 3,000 rockets so far. It is believed that they have somewhere in the range of 14,000 to 20,000 additional rockets, depending upon which source you look at. But what is significant is Number one, they can manufacture their own rockets. They don't have to be smuggled into Gaza as in the past. And number two, the range and accuracy of these rockets is significantly better. The Hamas is now producing a new rocket called the Ayash 250. It has a range of about 150 miles. As a result, somewhere around 4 to 5 million Israelis are now within range of Hamas rockets. Most of their rockets are still short range, 6 to 12 miles, but they do have a range of 150 miles on the other. In addition, they have stockpiled a number of other rockets with quite deadly payloads. So it's not just the rocket, it's what they're carrying in terms of bombs from Iran, the Fajr 3 and the Fajr 5. They've also gotten the M302s from Syria and Russian Kornet anti-tank equipment. So essentially a big difference is the level of arms that Hamas has that they didn't have in the past. In the past, the majority of rockets shot off from Hamas landed harmlessly. And those that were not going to be harmless were stopped by the Iron Dome. The Iron Dome is an anti-missile system that the Israelis have. So far, it has proven to be just slightly over 90% effective. It's a remarkable system. It can somehow determine if a rocket shot off from Gaza is going to land in areas that are populated, or is it going to land in the desert or in the water or somewhere like that. And so Iron Dome is only shot off on those that are likely to cause harm. 90% of them have been stopped, but that still means that others are getting through. So a significant difference is that Hamas is stronger and willing to keep this up for a while. Another difference is because of the lack of the Israeli government to form, or of anyone within Israel, Israeli leadership to form a stable government, that also is another difference. A third big difference is that this conflict has expanded into two areas that the past did not. The West Bank, again, Judea and Samaria, if you will, and violence within Israel. That is a major difference from the past. In this conflict, fighting has broken out between Israeli settlers living in the West Bank and their Arab neighbors. So far, it has been reported that 10 Palestinian Arabs have been killed in the West Bank. There are armed groups of Palestinians and armed groups of Israelis wandering around the West Bank, causing additional levels of violence. Another example of the problem is that there has been a quasi-civil war that has broken out within Israel, particularly in mixed communities, communities and cities that have Israeli Jewish and Israeli Arab population. By way of quick background, somewhere around 20% of the Israeli population, ballpark 2 million Israeli citizens, are Arab citizens. And there has been now fighting, violence broken out. Arabs have broken into Israeli stores, restaurants. They attacked the synagogue. And similarly, Jews have, there was a horrible scene that I saw on television. They pulled some guy out of a car and attacked him. Armed bands of settlers from the West Bank have come into mixed communities and attacked Arabs there. This is a really dangerous situation. Another factor that you need to take into consideration is there has become a greater generational divide with younger Jews and younger Arabs being more likely to be involved in conflict than in the past. Another difference is this is the first conflict that has taken place since Israel and 4 Arab-dominated or Muslim-dominated countries signed normalization agreements with Israel in the last few months of the Trump administration. These are the so-called Abraham Accords. First one was United Arab Emirates, followed by Bahrain, followed by Sudan, followed by Morocco. On September 15, 2020, then President Trump said, after decades of division and conflict, we mark the dawn of a new Middle East. These agreements will serve as the foundation for a comprehensive peace for the entire region. Well, unfortunately, that's not been the case. The Abraham Accords have proven to be a nice thing, but not particularly relevant to what we're seeing right now. They have done nothing to help end this conflict. United Arab Emirates, in fact, the people in the UAE and in Saudi Arabia, which was targeted to be the next country to normalize relations with Israel, are suddenly showing their solidarity for the Palestinian Accord. So it doesn't look like that was particularly helpful. And another factor, and we'll get to the Biden administration in a couple seconds, that proved not to be helpful is the Trump administration closed the Palestinian office in Washington and closed the US consulate in East Jerusalem that reached out to the Palestinians, making it more difficult for the United States to negotiate to deal with the Palestinians on an ongoing basis. Next question, the third one of our four. What is the US role? Clearly, the Biden administration and Joe Biden himself did not want this to take place. Biden has had a long history of support for Israel. I remember the first time I had a conversation with Biden about this, he told me that on his first trip to Israel, his tour guide was Golda Meir. And she told him if there were no Israel, Jews would have to invent one. His record on support for Israel has been outstanding for his entire 40 plus 50 years of political life. And nothing that is happening now has shaken that. It is clear also that Biden did not want to get involved in the Arab-Israeli conflict. It's a no-win situation. Biden had 5 major foreign policy goals, and he wanted to be limited to these. Number one, to restore relations with US allies, which were undermined by the Trump administration. First trip is going to be to Europe, restore NATO, et cetera. Second, establish a better way of confronting the challenges posed by China and Russia. Third, deal with global climate issues, rejoin the Paris Peace Accord, and make climate an aspect of all American foreign policy. Fourth, if possible, to try and renegotiate a nuclear agreement with Iran, knowing full well that Iran is a hostile nation, terrorism is likely to continue, but if you can at least take the nuclear aspect off the table, it would be a step forward. And then fifth, the pandemic, international dealing with the pandemic, what we're now calling vaccine diplomacy, rejoining the World Health Organization, et cetera, and minimizing American role where possible, which is what the withdrawal from Afghanistan is about. Clearly, the Middle East was not going to be a top priority. That said, the Middle East didn't wait for Biden. These events took place. These current events is not likely to lead to a resolution. And so what Biden and the administration is trying to do is to work out a ceasefire. The term that they keep using is a lull. At least deal with the current situation, stop the violence, and get things relatively under control so you can look towards the future. To that end, the Biden administration sent Hadi Amar, very highly respected US diplomat. His title is Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Israeli and Palestinian Affairs. He left yesterday or the day before to the region. He has already started talking to Abbas in Palestine. Biden called Abbas, has called Netanyahu a number of times. The trouble is we have no contact with Hamas, and there's no way for us to deal with them. So the ending of the current situation is going to come about by mediation from another source, 2 of which are most likely. First, Egypt. Egypt has good relations with, or relations, whether they're good or not is a different matter, has relations with Hamas. They border, Egypt and Gaza border each other, and obviously with the United States and with Israel. And the second likely interlocutor is the nation of Qatar. Qatar is working behind the scenes to try and at least calm the current situation down. So where is this likely to head? I think we're likely to see a ceasefire at some point in the not too distant future. Whether this will be a matter of days or weeks, hopefully the sooner the better. But will it lead to the beginning of an effort to try and resolve the conflict? Hard to say, and that is so incredibly complicated on how to structure a peace agreement that everyone can claim some form of victory as we move forward in a way that preserves lives, that Israelis and Palestinians feel comfortable going to bed at night knowing that they are going to wake up in their beds the next morning. And that means that Hamas has got to stop shooting rockets towards Israel. Once the rockets stop, and I think the Israelis will stop with their airstrikes as well, but that needs to be negotiated. And again, the US is in a difficult position to try and accomplish that. In all likelihood, as I mentioned, that is likely to take place by the diplomatic efforts of Egypt and Qatar. Anyway, I've gone on a bit too long, and so I will turn this back over to Meredith.
Ralph, thank you. You are to the minute on time. You had until 10:40, and that's exactly where we are. So thank you. That was incredibly comprehensive and much appreciated. And I know there probably will be questions. So again, if people have questions, please don't hesitate to email them to me, and Ralph, I'll send them along to you if that's okay. But thank you for that. And obviously, several people have messaged me wanting to know if we can share your presentation with others. We're recording this. So as long as you're okay with it, we'll make it available for people. Okay, I'm going to hand things over to a colleague of mine, Rita Edelstein. Rena works, as Julie mentioned, for the Jewish Federations of North America Israel office. Rena has been managing the relief efforts that we have been a part of as the Jewish Federation of Greater Rochester in partnership with our 150 federations across the country. And Rena is going to give us a brief overview of what we are doing on the ground as a federation system. So Rena, thank you very much for being here. We really appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure, Meredith. Thank you. And I found Ralph's talk fascinating and very comprehensive. I would just want to start. I just want to start with a personal note, which is that I'm originally from New York, and I made Aliyah about 22 years ago. And on the first day of the rocket attacks, one fell not far from my house. And my children were home. We ran. We don't have a bomb shelter in our house, so we ran for the garage, which is the safest room in the building. And I just wanted to say, just to give a personal perspective on Ralph's comments, by saying that in 6 days, 2,700 rockets have fallen on Israel. And whether you have 15 seconds to run to a bomb shelter, like the people on the Gaza border, or 60 seconds like I do, because I'm a little farther away, you never get used to it. You just don't ever get used to having to run and get your wits about you and carry your dog, find your dog, and so there is and as Ralph mentioned also, this fighting has been different because not only are we coming off of Corona, we're coming off of a national tragedy in Har Meron, where 45 people were killed on Lag BaOmer. And then we're coming to this where almost 60% of the country is experiencing rockets.
Oops, Rena, you just froze. I think we might have just lost Rena. Hopefully she'll come back. She'll come back in. Rena.
I know, I was going to say, if Rena can hear us, turn your video off, and then we can hear you via audio, perhaps.
Yeah. Maybe what we'll do, since we lost Rena, we'll jump ahead for a moment, then hopefully she'll come back. As many of you know, we have a very special relationship with the city of Modin. It's our partnership region, and we are back and forth to Israel often with youth, adults, and everything in between. And it's been a sad year because we haven't been back and forth to or from Modi'in. So, and we are very much looking forward to being able to see our friends in Modi'in again. But the mayor of Modi'in sent a special video for us this morning. We have a very wonderful, close relationship with Mayor Beavis. So I'm going to play the video, and hopefully by the time the video is done, we will have Rena back. Hang on. I need to ask a favor. Michal, somehow somebody else was made host of the meeting, so I don't have the ability to share my screen. So if somebody could allow me to share my screen, that would be great.
There are two accounts, Meredith, and
Yep.
for some reason I'm not able to, and here comes
I
Rena.
might be one of the accounts. What do you need me to do?
Debbie, I think that you became me as the other Meredith. I need you to
Okay.
enable me to share my screen.
Okay.
But is Rena back?
She's not.
Okay.
No, she's
Um,
back in.
oh,
She's here.
Oh, is she?
Okay, great. All right, Rena, we're
Okay.
going to switch back over to you again. Sorry about that.
Meredith, you're a host now.
Okay, thanks, Debbie. Great, I see it.
Oh, thank you. So I do apologize. We're having issues with electricity here in Israel with all of the rockets hitting different
Oh,
wires. In any case, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so what I wanted to say is that federations have been active in Israel for the last 50 years, and your support has been ongoing both during normative times and during times of emergency. But I can tell you that one of the things that happens is that during times of emergencies, federations are the first Jewish organization to step up and look for ways to control. Today, we are looking on your behalf to support our historic partners in three major areas. As I was saying before, over 60% of the country has experienced rocket attacks, many of them for the first time. We are seeing huge increases in the number of people who are calling hotlines for trauma relief. This is, we have very sophisticated trauma relief programs on the borders with Gaza, which have been experienced these kinds of rockets for the last 20 years, but Tel Aviv and Ramat Gan and Rehovot have never seen this kind of shelling. And we are seeing huge numbers of people, especially parents with small children, turning for trauma relief. So the first thing that we've done is we are looking to provide support that supports all of the trauma organizations in Israel to provide additional hours for all the social workers who are answering the calls and making home visits, even during these difficult times. The second thing that we're doing is through our partner, the Jewish Agency, I don't know if you know this, but federations are the first one to reach out on behalf of global Jewry when somebody is personally injured during the fighting. So we have, through the Victims of Terror Fund, within 24 hours of your house being damaged or you being hurt, or God forbid, losing somebody you love, somebody from the Jewish Agency shows up and provides a check, symbolic, $1,000, but just to let them know that World Jewry is thinking of them and that they don't have to run around looking for cash if they need to go buy a new toothbrush or if they need to pay a hotel bill, or if we're continuing to provide. In addition, many of you may have known that we had some 3,000 Ethiopians make Aliyah since January of this year. Many of them, some 2,000 of them, are on the southern border in 8 absorption centers run by the Jewish Agency. These absorption centers are, first of all, overworked, overwhelmed, and they're dealing with 2,000 people who don't speak English, don't speak Hebrew, don't understand what's going on, don't understand the alarms. And so we are looking to get in some additional support for the teams in running these centers to help the Ethiopian Olim try and figure out how to maneuver in this system. And the last place that Federation is providing support is through the JDC, who during normal days provides programming for people with disabilities and also for the elderly. And so we're looking for ways to, I don't know if you recognize the fact that many people, elderly who live upstairs in apartments without elevators, can't actually make it out to the bomb shelters. And so they are forced to find a room in their house where they can take cover. The trauma of not being able to take care of yourself when the bombs are flying overhead has added to their suffering. And so we are on behalf of federations looking to provide additional volunteer support and also social worker support for the elderly and the people with disabilities who are prone to trauma on a normal basis, and even prone, even more susceptible to dealing with the trauma now. So I just want to end now because I know we're running late, and I apologize for my connection, and just to thank you for everything that you do, Meredith, and your board and your lay leadership on a daily basis. We would not be as strong as we are here in Israel if you were not doing what you were doing every day. And we will get through this. It takes a few, and it helps to know that Federation is there to support us during these difficult days. So thank you, and I wish you all Chag Sameach.
Rina, thank you so much, and a Chag Sameach to you. Most importantly, we obviously want you and your family to stay safe and be safe. And we are really all here thinking about you and praying for a swift resolution. So please take care of yourself. And thank you for all that you're doing on our behalf on the ground in Israel. We couldn't do it without you either. So thank you. Okay, we are now going to go on to the mayor's video, which I can now share with you.
To our dear friends in Rochester, good afternoon in Israel and good morning in Rochester. In times of crisis, three things become clear: who your friends are, who your enemies are, and where your strength lies. In these times of war, we are standing strong as a city and as a nation. Our city of Modi'in Makamim has been exposed almost daily to incoming rocket attack from Gaza Strip. We have been taking every precaution to stay safe and remain strong in these times of war. Our city is prepared at the highest levels. Our strength comes not only from our resilience, but also from our friends. To you, our friends in Rochester, whose valued friendship we have enjoyed for many years now, and who continue to stand, love, and support. We thank you for your solidarity and your concern during these difficult times. We will get through this hand in hand and side by side. Thank you very much, and Chag Shavuot Sameach.
I'm now going to turn things over to another member of the Modi'in community. I'm one of our partnership steering committee members, Roni Poitner, to share a few words with us as well. Roni, thank you so much for being here this morning. And this afternoon in Israel. And as you know, we sent a video last week. Our hearts are with you, and we certainly are all praying for everybody in Modi'in to be safe. So can you share a little bit with us about how things are going in Modi'in?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Meredith. So my name is Ronit. I live in Modi'in for the last 22 years. I'm married to Guy, and I'm a mother of Yarden, Nadav, and Dana. Nadav, my 20 years old son Nadav is a combat soldier, a parachutist. Last Monday, it was the Shloshim, 30 days since my mother passed away, and my son got a day off from army to participate in her memorial. But in the middle of the ceremony at the cemetery, he was called to return to his base immediately. His unit is based just near Gaza Strip, waiting for orders to get in Gaza. We are very worried and very tense as well. Actually, all the people around me are very, very worried. Meanwhile, Tuesday night, siren was heard in the city of Modi'in. Hamas fired rockets on the city. And the last time we got rockets was 7 years ago at Tzuk Eitan operation, just as Ralph mentioned before. And then we ran to the safe room in our house. Also, I was born in Ramle. Ramle is a mixed city of Jews and Arabs, a city of coexistence between Arabs and Jews. And the last days have shown multiple violence acts by Arabs against Jews and their property. In other mixed cities, a similar phenomenon is taking place, violence of Arabs against Jews, including burning synagogues, and of Jews against Arabs, as well as just Ralph mentioned before, there was a terrible occasion in Bat Yam, a city near Tel Aviv, that a group of Jews took an Arab man out of his car and beat him up. So we are very worried. This complicated and troublesome political situation, together with the instability of it, influence everything. Sorry. So we pray for diplomatic solutions, that the violence will stop, and that we can rebuild our close relationship with our neighbors. Yeah, we pray for peace. And last thing that I want to say, but important thing, that I would like to thank you all, to thank you, our friends, for your support. It means a lot to me and for the whole community. Thank you. And Chag Sameach. We hope it will be happy Chag.
We do too, Ronit. Thank you. And please, for you and your family, be safe. And we're holding you all in our hearts. So thank you. It's now my pleasure to call on two of our Modi'in residents who are here in Rochester, Itamar Bergman and Oren Katz, who are our Israel emissaries, our Shinshinim. And Itamar is going to share some special words and a prayer with us.
Thank you, Meredith. So first I'd like to say, just all of you, our friends in Modi'in, please be safe. We hope you have a very quiet and safe holiday, that you're gonna have a wonderful time with your families. And we all wish and pray for quieter days and peaceful days very soon. And to our friends in Rochester, which I learned about this community this year so much, and I'm honored to be here. I'd like to thank you for your support and for being here on this call today. A small act like joining a Zoom can make a big difference, and your presence here means a lot to us. And I can say it as a community member of Rochester and an Israeli, and as a community member in Modi'in. So thank you a lot. And I'd like to read quickly a prayer, both in Hebrew and in English, for the safety of Israel. מי שברך אבותינו אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, ואמותינו שרה, רבקה, לאה ורחל, הוא יברך את תושבי מדינת ישראל, החיים תחת האיום של טילי הרס ומוות, ואש ושנאה ואיבה. הקדוש ברוך הוא יחזק את ליבם ואת כושר עמידתם בעת משבר, עד יעבור זעם. יהי רצון מלפני יושב במרומים, שייתן עצה טובה בלב כל קברניטי המדינה, שידעו לנהל את מלחמת העם בתושייה, בהבנה ובחוכמה. השם צבאות, אלוהי מערכות ישראל, שמור נא על חיילי צבא ההגנה לישראל, העומדים במערכה ביבשה, באוויר ובים, בחזית ובעורף, ועל השוטרים, בכוחות הביטחון וההצלה. הצילם אלוהינו מכל צרה וצוקה, מכל פגע רע, ושלח ברכה והצלחה במעשה ידיהם, צאתם לשלום ושובם לבתיהם לחיים ולשלום. אבינו שבשמיים, שים שלום בארץ ושמחת עולם לכל יושביה. ויקוים בנו במהרה, בימינו מקרא שכתוב, וישבו איש תחת גפנו ותחת תאנתו, ואין מחריד, כי פי אדוני צבאות דיבר. וכן יהי רצון, ונאמר אמן. And now in English, may the one who blessed our patriarchs, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and our matriarchs, Sarah, Rivka, Leah, and Rachel, bless the inhabitants of the state of Israel who live under the daily threat of missiles of death and destruction and fire of hatred and loathing. May the blessed Holy One strengthen their hearts and reinforce their resilience at this time of crisis until the wrath passes. May it be the will of the one who resides in the heights to give good counsel to the hearts of all the leaders of the state, that they know to conduct these people's war with wisdom, discernment, and resourcefulness. Lord of hosts, protect the soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces involved in this campaign, on land, in the air, and at the sea, on the battlefront and at the home front, and the police and all the security and rescue forces. Save them, our God, from every trouble and malevolent design, and deliver blessing and success to their striving of their hands. May they go out in peace and return to their homes alive and whole. Our guardian in heaven, bring peace to the land and endless joy to its inhabitants, and fulfill for them speedily in our days what is written in scripture. But every man shall sit under his grapevine or fig tree with no one to disturb him, for it was the Lord of hosts who spoke. May it all be your will, and let us say amen. Amen.
Thank you so much. We're so grateful to have you and Oren here. I know it's hard being so far away from your homes and your family, and I know how much you've been worried about everybody, and they know that too. We're taking good care of you here, and they're being taken good care of there, and I know that you'll be back soon for a visit. But we hold Modi'in in our hearts, and we hold you, the two of you, close to, and make sure that you're okay during this difficult time of being so far away. So thank you for all that you're doing, that you continue to do. So with that, we are going to close our program. I wanted to thank Julie and Rabbi Stein, Ralph Nurenberger, Rena Edelstein, the mayor, and Ronit, and obviously Itamar, for your words of wisdom this morning, for your words of comfort. And I know I share with everybody on our call the desire to see peace and a peaceful resolution as soon and as quickly as possible. And we hope for quieter and peaceful times to come, and the sooner they can come, the better. But until then, our community is standing in solidarity with our family and our friends in Israel, and we are here for you. And please know that that in everything that you do, we are right there at your side, ensuring that we're doing our part here to make sure that people understand what the situation is, and what our response is, and that we will not see Israel. We will do our part to ensure that Israel is spoken about properly here, and that the news is shared in a way that we feel comfortable. And it's been a challenging time watching the media and social media, and we are doing our part on our end too. Certainly, it's not the same as rockets raining down, but we are with you, and we're doing our part here. So thank you, and thank you all for coming today. And as we have more updates, we will certainly send them out, and hopefully we'll maybe convene a program like this again as things unfold. So thank you, and thank you all for being here, and most importantly, Chag Shavuot Sameach. Thank you all.